to Whiskey and Whiskey. Very special episode of Whiskey and Whiskey. This is part 2 of 2. Initially, I thought there was going to be 4 or 5 parts. We decided to kind of change it up. But part 1, I'll leave a link down below to which you can see where we're drinking Van Winkle whiskies today in a totally different venue than what I'm normally coming to you from in this episode of Whiskey, or in the show of Whiskey and Whiskey. This is Paris Texas Bar and Smokehouse in the heart of Kilkenny City. Multi-award winning bar and smokehouse, I should say. And of course, with the whiskey bar manager of the world in the background, Pádraig Rafter. I just want to say thank you to Pat, the owner, and Pádraig for allowing myself and my guest here, who I'll introduce to you in a second, come in here and drink some of the finest and rarest bourbons in the world. I'm the Whiskey Chaser Brian, and along with me today is Ian Duke of High Spirits, Sazerac
Ireland.
Sazerac Ireland ambassador. Knowledgeable expert, if we say that, kind of all-around nice bourbon guy that likes to give us Pappy Van Winkles.
I like to drink bourbon, yeah.
Well, we love to drink bourbon, especially this. We have a very special episode. As I said, these are the Pappy Van Winkle Family Reserve whiskies, and we're going to open and drink all 3 today on camera.
We don't drink all the bottle. Pádraig would be very upset.
Well, we're not going to drink all of them because we were talking about the direction and what way to go with this at the start before this, and I didn't realize the secondary value of the 23-year-old until we kind of were having a little bit of a chat there, and I said, "We're opening that on camera." Yeah, we are. So what was this? What did we say the secondary value roughly?
Anywhere from $2,000, $3,000, somewhere around there. Euros. Anywhere over, well over 1,500 euros, 2,000 euros.
Thank God I have steady pouring hands. So like I said, this is part 2 of 2. The first we drank the 10-year-old Rip Van Winkle and the 12-year-old Van Winkle whiskey. So we're moving on to this. And I just want to make note that Paris Texas Bar is part of the Kilkenny Whiskey Guild here in Kilkenny. 10 pubs that have the finest and best Irish whiskey in the world, as well as this place in particular, as some absolutely exceptional bourbon whiskies. And there will be a tasting coming up with the guild very soon for these 3 whiskies. Isn't that right, Ian?
5 whiskies.
5? We're doing all 5?
Yeah, doing all 5. Yeah.
Ballers.
Yeah, we're doing the full run.
Full run?
Yeah, I don't think everyone's going to make the trip, but we'll go.
I'm going to make the trip. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be the most knowledgeable man. Because the secret about, I'll actually leave a link down below to the Kilkenny Whiskey Guild, and you can check it out if you're local. Hopefully, we'll be doing this all kind of post kind of COVID restrictions, and people can interact and mingle and stuff like that. But I've never had these whiskies before. This is my first venture, as it was in part 1 with the 10 and the 12-year-old Van Winkles. I've never had the Pappy Van Winkle Family Reserve whiskies ever.
Room for a treat.
So really, you keep saying.
The Pappy 15 is my personal favourite. Probably up there with nearly anything in the Sazerac portfolio. To be honest, it's just all kinds of special.
I think it's rare enough to see a 15-year-old Pappy being opened and drank on camera, but I think it's kind of, we're going into hen's teeth category here in having the 15, the 20, and the 23-year-old.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen 3 open consecutively in one sitting.
I told you it was a good idea.
Yeah.
So walk us through a bit. We did on the 10 and the 12, you kind of brought us through Julian or Pappy Van Winkle and a little bit of the history there behind that. Now bring us kind of up to date and where we are now with the 15, the 20, and the 23. And as you're doing that, I'm going to open. We'll go first for the 15.
Okay.
We're going to do all 3 of these on
Steady
camera.
hands.
Steady hands.
Okay, so
Cross the crotch so I don't spill any or drop the bottle.
I suppose where we left the story of Pappy, Julian the First, his son Julian the Second had served in the war. I came back and started working with Pappy. What's your plan?
Sorry.
Jesus. I started working with Pappy, and unfortunately we mentioned he passed away. He got cancer and passed away at a pretty young age. Before he passed away, Julian's the third, joined the company in 1977.
He actually was part of the company though 4 years. He was there for a couple of years before Julian II died.
Yeah, he was. And when Julian III joined the company, it actually wasn't the Weller distillery. It was the JP Van Winkle's. So Julian Pappy Van Winkle and Sons.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not Julian Pappy, as everyone thinks it is. It's actually Julian Proctor Van Winkle. That's
his
actual name.
I didn't know that. That's a nice bit of information there. I was just thinking I may close this because of oxidization. Keep that bottle closed.
So when the Stitch Weller Distilleries was which Pappy the first made famous. Unfortunately, closed in 1972.
Yeah.
You would, for a couple of tricky situations, you had the decline in bourbon and brown spirits in general. You had the increase of vodka and other white spirits. And
it was a kind of a trendy time. People didn't really want to be associated with the spirits that their fathers or grandfathers drank.
Yeah, absolutely. And they wanted to step out and be a little bit more free and liberal and loose, and as was vodka and the other white spirit, just gained such popularity. Which unfortunately led to the closure and sale of the Stitch Weller Distillery in 1972, and it's something that Julian II, fought and battled with that, until the day he died.
Yeah.
Literally, 11 years later.
Yeah, and there was a book that we had mentioned in the first Pappy Land, Wright Thompson, and he mentioned that it was one of the greatest regrets because he spoke to Julian III, which is the maker of this. He said that it was one of the life's greatest regrets that he carried to his grave, that his father had to sell the distillery.
And okay, I suppose that's probably makes the Pappy story a little bit more special because Julian II went and bought the old Hoffman distillery, a really dodgy old rickety building and some really old bottling equipment, and started selling, memorable decanters, and that's where the old Rip Van Winkle label was kind of started. And when he died, Julian III took over that mantle and really living paycheck to paycheck. He borrowed, begged and steal.
He actually remortgaged his house and the business to even get more money in. And when we get to that point of when he actually bought the stock, which was back in that time, ballsy.
It really was because there was no bourbon boom. The bourbon is in a massive boom at the moment, as is Irish whiskey. But this didn't exist back in the early 90s, the late 80s, early 90s. It was a big risk, and it's all he knew. And I suppose there was a lot. He wanted to make sure that the legacy of his grandfather and his father continued. So that's why it was so special.
It's not really, and I think this is what I just while it's fresh in my head because I will forget it as I do most things. And I said this in the first part, and it's one part of the book that I think stood out the most to me, and the story, and it kind of clicked with me then. It's not a story about inheritance. This is really Pappy Van Winkle and Family Reserve, and the name and the bourbon is a story about survival. And it goes back to the late 1800s, when Pappy was a salesman for, I think it was Weller. W.L. Weller.
Pappy wasn't born into the bourbon hierarchy. He wasn't born into a bourbon family. He created his own legacy.
So this is literally a rags to kind of riches, and then kind of a decline, and then back
to rags, and then eventually, thankfully, from their side, back to riches again.
And I think that's why it has such you get this real kind of like special feeling when you drink these bottles, or when you hear the story. It's meant to be drank on special occasions, and that's the key word. And meant to be drank with family. They're meant to be drank. They're meant to be opened.
That's something that, look, I know we don't like seeing bottles lobbed onto the secondary market. We want to see these open and enjoyed by people, because their actual sale price, their retail price is a lot lower than the secondary market, and that's what they're designed to be. They're designed to just be open and drank and enjoyed, as is every whiskey. So the 15-year-old, for me, I can't wait to try it again. So.
Well, should we have a little taste of that, and then we'll kind of go on to the 20 and the 23-year-old, and just kind of, because we're looking at it here and it's looking back at me, and I'm kind of thirsty after. It's been a few minutes since we had a drink, so you're really kind of getting that full-on bourbon, antique.
It's this bourbon assault in your nose.
It's not overly spicy, and that's what 107 proof.
Yeah, so it's the same. The 10-year-old is the exact same ABV as and proof as the 15. The 15-year-old, 107 proof.
Really kind of those prominent dried fruits in your face. And this is Buffalo Trace.
Yeah.
This one is Buffalo Trace. And I think the key and the most interesting part, well, one of the most interesting parts I find is, we mentioned it in the last video, again, if you haven't seen that, link down below, but this is all the same recipe as the Weller. It's just these have been put in different parts of the warehouse and aged for longer times, and these are exceptional casks.
Yeah,
they're hand-picked.
Hand-selected.
Yeah.
There's no different when you walk. I've been to Buffalo Trace, and it's if you ever get a chance to get over, it's just beautiful over there.
Yeah, no.
But when you walk around the distillery and you do the tour, you don't see barrels stamped with Pappy Van Winkle. They say double ale weller.
Yeah.
Because they're all the weller mash bill. They're all the same recipe. It's the same in Buffalo Trace. They're all Buffalo Trace barrels. You don't say Eagle Rare or Stag Junior or George T Stag. They're all Buffalo Trace, and even the same with Sazerac Rye and some of the Rye recipes. So it is about where the barrel is in the warehouse, and I suppose it's just as I mentioned in the last video, it's experience from making bourbon for 200 odd years.
Yeah, that's really interesting. When we were talking earlier about Julian signing the deal with Buffalo Trace in 2002. So this whiskey that is Buffalo Trace was on, the first one was 2017. What bottle did you say this was here? Do you remember?
This is 2019. I think.
19. So this is Buffalo Trace. Yeah. And we'll talk a bit more about that as we get into it. But let's have a little sip. Sandra. Cheers.
Yeah.
Mother of God. That's a different animal.
Every time.
It's just...
We just need to take a minute and savor and chew it.
That's incredible. Like, it is chewy.
And I said this to you before you started, and you kind of laughed at me, and I was like, Brian, you're going to have to chew these. And now you understand why.
Yeah.
You can really see it. If you look off the glass, you can see it on the camera.
The legs.
It just hangs off the glass. And it's just those fruits have kind of evolved a little bit and got a little bit deeper and richer. You get a lot more the barrel spice at the side of your tongue and more barrel tanning. So when that dryness is just hanging off your cheeks and
puckering. But it's almost like it coats the tongue then with your overwhelming dry fruits and really complements the nose, and it's just like.
But there's a buttery and oiliness, and like you get that from the wheat. So the wheat gives that to the bourbon, that creamy, buttery oiliness. That's a dominant factor of.
Because these are like the mash bill for these are wheat, a heavier secondary grain is the wheat as opposed to rye.
And just as going and going, I'm still.
A lot of hang time, even on the throat now. It's like it's only kind of coming from the tongue back to the throat with the spice, but
it's still going.
Your vanilla notes, your caramel notes, your lovely buttery toffee kind of.
Yeah, and a little bit of that probably tobacco, a little bit of kind of barrel char starting to break through. Look, it's 15 years in old barrels, and then you probably there's a little bit of kind of dry leather starting to appear right at the back. You can see it starting to evolve, and as you get into the 20 and 23, you'll really see that. You're like an old, you can feel the oldness of it.
Yeah, the oldness, the antiqueness, I suppose. Yeah. That's gorgeous though. That is...
Just smell it again.
It's different level. It's different level. Yeah, you're getting that lovely antique nose from the bourbon, dried fruits, very fruity, very sweet.
Sweet, spice, caramel, toffee. It's quite, loads of dark fruits.
Tannins. Little bit of heat from the bourbon barrel coming through.
It's quite a high ABV. It's 53.5%, so it's quite strong.
That's
the devil.
That's serious. Yeah, I really enjoyed that now. I've never had any of these. As I said, like in the part one of these, I don't normally drink bourbon. We live in Ireland, so everything I do on the channel is normally Irish whiskey related, and it was only a couple of weeks ago I had the E.H. Taylor small batch. So for me to go from that to this is quite, I feel you're special.
You're amongst royalty.
Amongst royalty here. I don't even know if I deserve it, but look, at least it's open and it's not being, flogged on the secondary market.
I mean, and it's anyone that is watching this video, no matter where you are in the world, if you find yourself in Kilkenny, you know where to come.
Paris Texas Bar, they have them open and they're here. Well, they're open now. The other two we're getting to, so
we'll get there.
We'll get there. We will get there. Talk us through then. So I mentioned at the start about 2002, okay, and the deal with Buffalo Trace. Kind of take us from there, bring us up to date.
I suppose your Buffalo Trace, we already owned the Weller brand, so they bought that from. I think it was from Diageo numerous years previous, and they would have got some older wheated bourbon stocks, I think, along with that. And it was just a kind of marriage made in heaven, because yeah, we're like Sazerac is a family-owned company. A lot of the same philosophies that Julian and Preston, his son, would have wanted to maintain. But also we made good bourbon at the time, and it just worked. It's better.
Nice. Just a little drop. Just a little drop came out there. I spilled a touch.
It's okay. We'll forgive you.
I'm nervous.
But it was just a marriage made in heaven, because look, we already made the mash bill. The mash bill was the same as the Pappy mash bill, or as I mentioned in the last video, we have a very old yeast strains which was quite similar. But it was quite an uncertain time, I'm sure, for Julian to put all his faith in Buffalo Trace, and tasting his first batch of Pappies must have been absolutely terrifying to go.
Yeah. Is
it going to be as good? Because I think, as you mentioned, that book, I read it as well, and you're really not sure, because the taste that everyone wants to think of when we drink Pappy is Stitzelweller.
Yeah.
So, but the only one, unless you're lucky enough to find a bottle of Stitzelweller bourbon,
and it's very rare nowadays to even find one of the old ones.
It's hen's teeth.
Yeah.
Stuff, yeah. It's Julian's mind, and it's his palate, and Julian the third seems to be, just from reading the book, and I'm reading his I suppose his aunt's book, which was Always Fine Bourbon, was out a couple of years ago.
I think it was Sally, was it?
Yeah, Sally, yeah.
Van Winkle, I think. Could be wrong, could be Susie.
I think it's Sally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't read the book, obviously, but,
Pappy and Julian the third seem to be very alike. Both seem to have an amazing palate, a really good understanding, but it's that memory that I suppose that means so much to Pappy.
It's one way to have it down, which of course they would have in a book as a mash bill, with the yeast, but it's another thing to be able to recall the way whiskey tasted.
And it felt, and
and he does all of that from memory.
And in the book, there's a really great chapter where he's actually sitting in Buffalo Trace in the tasting room, and all the Buffalo Trace main tasting guys are there, and him and Preston are going through each barrel, and each barrel of Pappy is tasted by a Van Winkle. Any of these bottles, whatever barrel it came from, it had to be tasted by a Van Winkle to get the cut. But yeah, it's a really great scene in the book where he's literally just kind of going, "Oh my God, this is Stitzelweller. This is what I've been after. This is what we wanted," and I'm sure it was joy and relief.
Relief. I think more so than anything, because I suppose he didn't really know if it was going to make the trip. I mean, that's part of it. They reference that.
That's his line in the book. It's Mother Nature and Grandfather Time is, and that's really it.
Sorry about that.
That didn't.
I did it again. I'm so used to doing it with Irish whiskey, it's just kind of let it breathe a little bit. But
yeah. And look, you do need to let these breathe a little bit as well, because they are big and they are bold, and if you drink them all and leave the glass for like a couple of hours if you're around, and to come back and smell them afterwards, it's just the most beautiful thing.
Yeah, there's that's the 15. I'm going back to that. There's a touch in the glass, and it's just kind of. You're getting those dark fruits, but it's all bourbon, isn't it? It's kind of bourbon, oak shavings,
vanilla,
caramel,
butterscotch, all those really big kind of typical bourbon flavors. Yeah,
that's incredible on the nose.
So the 20-year-old, then I suppose the 20-year-old is what made Pappy so famous. So we talked about the old Hoffman distillery, and Julian was bottling all these little decanters and old under the old Rip Van Winkle label. And then in '95 he started to produce the Pappy Van Winkle Family Reserve, the 20-year-old. He got some older stocks of whiskey.
Was it Stitzelweller? The older stocks? We're not. I think
some was Stitzelweller. He was getting, I think, from the book. He was getting some from Stitzelweller. He was getting from a couple of other distilleries as well. So it was really what he could afford to buy and what he could get his hands on.
And we didn't actually mention that at all. Was the story of how he got all of the whiskies?
Yeah, the old Stitzelweller stock.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that, because I thought that was a great part of the book.
Yeah, it was really good, and it's something I didn't know, and I've been talking about Pappy for quite a number of years in Ireland with High Spirits, and I thought it was really interesting that Julian was obviously buying bits of whiskey, be it from you know, any distilleries and what he thought was good enough to be branded under the old Van Winkle label at the time. Until he got a phone call. I think the woman's name in the book he mentioned was Patsy.
I think so, Patsy or Patty. Yeah.
And she worked for United Distillers, I think, which became Diageo. And it was like, look, we have some old Situate stock we want to get rid of. We've been using it to put into Crown Royal in our Canadian Scotch, our Canadian blend, and you know, we thought of you and we'd give you a shout. And I think Julian nearly lost his life to think that there was still so Weller whiskey his father and he would have been responsible for making. It was just sitting there and it was going into Crown Royal, but now he's a chance to buy this whiskey back, something that's so close to his heart.
They made a reference. You told me a price that they paid per barrel, roughly.
Yeah, I think he said in the book from $200 a barrel upwards.
Yeah.
But like.
And what was it estimated to be? The stock that he pulled in was.
It didn't even say it, but you couldn't put a number on that kind of stuff. You know.
Incredible money.
Yeah.
Diageo did not know. It was a case of not knowing what they had.
But the bourbon boom wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
It was stock that was sitting in a warehouse taking up. You know, it was costing money because you know there was no demand for old bourbon.
It's a lot like the old kind of the way the Irish whiskey scene went in the early 1900s. And
no
like,
different.
If you can find casks now of old Irish whiskey, take your hand off.
Yeah.
I mean, but really like premium prices.
I know I've tasted some older bourbons from the kind of 80s and early 90s, and you would have had 12-year-olds age stamps on them, but there would have been 20-year-old liquid in it because they were just lobbing out whiskey to try sell it.
That's amazing, really, the way it went. And there was no to think that he, he mentioned then that he had to remortgage the house, the business. I think I said that already in this video. I'm not even sure how long we're in it, but just to get whatever stock he bought, absolutely everything he
could afford.
He could afford, yeah.
And then he released the Pappy Van Winkle label to the Spirits competition, and it was bourbon Pappy, the 20-year-old, got 99 out of 100.
And I think it was the first time that ever happened.
Yeah, it was the first time a bourbon was ever rated that highly.
Yeah.
And he entered the 15-year-old the same year and got 97 out of 100.
And that's kind of really what put the Pappy Van Winkle Family Reserve on the map, wasn't it? Because if I am correct, they were first, and then the old Rip.
They were later editions.
They were later editions, right? Okay.
Yeah, so there was the 10 and the 20 and the 15, I think, were the first editions, and that's what started a little bit of boom going. People really wanted to try this, what is the world's best bourbon at the time.
Yeah.
And it just evolved and escalated and built up over there to, becoming one of these cult bourbons and one of the most sought after bottles of whiskey in the world.
Yeah. And it is, it has every right to be up there. Just judging by the 15-year-old, that was sensational.
Yeah, well, there's good things to come. The top 15 for me is my favourite, to be honest, but the 20 and 23 are just something special as well. So
yeah, let's have a look. I suppose we've spoken enough, so Sláinte. A completely different nose.
Oh yeah.
Way more kind of what's that?
Kind of leathery. There's that bigger. The fruit is kind of. The big fresh fruitness is going to die down.
Yes.
It's more deeper, darker.
Now you have your leathery fruits.
Yeah.
They're kind of, I don't want to say dark chocolate vibe because there's not, but I think it's more of a milk chocolate kind of. And
you kind of think dates and like maraschino cherries, kind of.
Yeah.
Christmas cake, like really dark Christmas cake. If you make up a Christmas cake mix.
There's almost like that cotton candy sweetness to it, isn't there?
It really is, yeah.
Really rich. You can smell cotton candy when you're at a carnival or something like that a mile away.
That,
that's
it. And there's that little bit of that age starting to appear. You can really smell that age starting to come through.
But it's really well rounded, isn't it? Yeah. Right, let's do it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
So it's
a lot of buttery kind of.
It's much softer again. So this has gone back to the 90.4 proof, the same as the 12. And I mentioned to you off camera, I think that the 10 and the 15 share that same bigger, bolder, brasher DNA, and the 12 and the 20 are, of the same kind of from the same stable.
It's incredible. It's so oily. It's so dense. It's mouth coating. There's no
very creamy.
Yeah.
Spicy.
The spicy then is coming from the barrel, so it's that real refined spice. It's not, you're not like, whereas you find what you were saying earlier about your bourbons that are made with rye, you have that rye spice coming through, and it's where this one is kind of way more refined, tamed, barrel
And it's
spice.
very dry. You get that the barrel tannins are really starting to come through.
Yeah.
It's really dry inside your cheeks. But
Even on the finish now, I'm kind of getting oak shavings. Lovely kind of.
tobacco-y. There's that tobacco from the barrel chars. Is starting to come in there. Maybe with a little bit of leather.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. It's just so different from the 15.
So different. It's night and day from the 15. Really is. You could see why that got such a good rating. It's incredible.
Stunning. Genuinely stunning.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's much more to say about that, only that it's just fantastic.
No, I don't want to say anything about it. I'd like to kind of stay here drinking it if we could. All day. I don't even know what you know what? I don't want to ask what the IRP per shot is, but I know that secondary value has gone kind of out of control.
And I think secondary value is an unfair way of, I suppose, looking at this. But I think the unfortunate bit is if it's in a bar, you need to charge probably a pretty decent price, a pretty high price, because if it was 20 euros or 30 euros a measure, it'd be gone in a week.
Yeah.
Or a couple of days if you had the right people in. I know if I could get Pappy 15 for 25, 30 euros a measure,
Gone.
you'd nail the bottle.
But that's not a bad price, I don't think, for a 15-year-old bourbon.
No, but
I mean, like you mentioned to me before that when you start getting up in the age statements over kind of 12-ish, you're playing with a lot of
Like you're talking,
different elements that could ruin a whiskey and not, not make the distance, not make the trip.
so obviously in Buffalo Trace we made quite a huge number of whiskies, but I know one in particular was back in 2018. We had Eagle Rare 17 from our Antica collection, and every year they release a kind of age thing about how much is aged, or where it's aged, how many barrels and whatnot, but also the evaporation loss.
Yeah. So we got interrupted. There was a package being delivered, and it wasn't for either of us. Which kind
No free whiskey.
I mean, no free whiskey. I kind of messed up the whole thing. So
Yeah.
you were
I was just talking
saying.
about Buffalo Trace and our Antique collection, but our Eagle Rare 17, which is part of the Antique collection, there was back in 2018 there was an evaporation loss, that particular bottle, of 92.8% over 17 years. So you can imagine what that evaporation loss is at 20 and 23 years. So if they had 92% evaporation loss at 17 years,
Yeah.
92% of a 200 litre bourbon barrel,
There's not going to be a whole lot left.
no, there's not been a whole lot left. So I think something you need, I always ask this at tastings, like what were you doing 20 years ago when that was distilled? Where were you 20 years ago?
20 years ago, I was doing my Leaving Cert, which is kind of like the SATs, but they do it differently here in Ireland. You do it your last year of school, not your second to last in the States. And I was working in a pub down the road at the Millers. That's what I was doing, coming into summertime. That's a pain in the ass to do that exam.
Yeah, I was only in second year of school. I was only a babby.
Oh, you're only a little...
Yeah,
You're that young, are you?
Yeah.
Balding already.
I know.
Oh, shit, like myself.
It's too much testosterone. This is wrong.
So we should say, we should have actually mentioned that we're gone from the 20
Into
now
23.
to 23, and there it is. It's open. And I'm not going to forget to put the cap on it this time. I'll actually pour yours first, because I should have done that all along, and don't spill.
I'll tell you if he spills anything.
I'm nervous.
Oh,
Oh,
there we go.
it's a good shot of it now. Sorry about that.
And I know it's on camera, you can't see it or smell it. The smell in here is just phenomenal.
Oh, the third and the final one in the series and the video that we're doing today. So, whew.
So, 23 years in oak barrels in Kentucky, you're talking a huge barrel interaction. So, if you haven't tried this before, be prepared.
That's different. That's just different level. Deepness. It's like all those kind of dark notes that you said, the tobacco, the leather. You have really, really deep, dark fruits.
There's nearly like an etheriness, an ether kind of like,
A little bit of spirity kind of.
yeah, not like white spirits but there's definitely that kind of a spiritiness to it.
Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. That's stunning.
Right, let's give it a roll.
Yeah. Sláinte for the last one. And thank you very much for joining us today. And I just want to say thank you to Paris Texas Bar and Smokehouse for letting us come in, and Pat and Para Crafter for allowing us to open these live on camera. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm certainly going to enjoy this last little drop that we have. And there'll be plenty more videos like this to come in the near future, so make sure you've liked and subscribed. And of course, check out all of the Facebook pages. I'll leave all the links down below to the Kilkenny Whisky Guild, Paris Texas Bar, of course, High Spirits, Buffalo Trace, Pappy, everything. All the information down below. And here we go, to finish it off. It's that kind of whiskey you'd nearly lick your finger and run it inside the glass, just to make sure you got more of it.
It's so dry. Your mouth just goes
Sticky, yeah.
yeah, and it's thick and oily and creamy, and kind of as you said in the first one, that candy, that
Cotton candy floss
yeah,
is what we
candy
call
floss.
it here, but
It's just really coming through, you know.
Yeah.
It's absolutely phenomenal.
it's crazy how much it develops and opens up and changes. I mean, for the exact same spirit, just different age, possibly different places in the warehouse.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. And this is 40. Is the BV's this one? 47.8.
Yeah,
So we're kind of gone back. We're gone back up from the 20-year-old, but just down a little bit. From
well, this
15.
has to be cast strength, is it?
I
Barrel proof.
I don't know. I don't know. I won't.
You won't guess.
I won't be caught on camera saying otherwise.
There's too many aficionados out there that probably know
I don't know. I would.
what color.
I would say it's
underpants
not
is.
cast strength. If I was
Okay.
betting, just because I suppose in Ireland we have a low humidity, so we lose alcohol in ABV. But generally in Kentucky you have a lot of high humidity, so you actually evaporate off the water.
Yeah.
And you actually ABV increases. So
Oh,
within reason,
there's
I would
something
be.
I didn't actually know.
You will be actually. I will be. If I was betting, I would bet that it's been cut to that.
Okay.
And not cast.
So you're not living by that now. You're not swearing
no.
secrets here.
That's just my personal opinion.
The flavor of it is incredible. It's just, you could see why someone would sit down now and drink the whole lot of that. You shouldn't, by the way.
No, I shouldn't.
Drink
But it's,
responsibly.
in the book we mentioned earlier, there's a part of it where Julian, all the Julians, first, second, and third, used to drink their Pappy with some ice and a lemon peel.
Lemon twist, yeah.
Lemon twist, like so. I couldn't drink it any other way, bar this way.
I'm not really, and teach their own. There's, whatever you want to do. I'm not someone who puts, I don't put a drop of water into it. I don't like a cube of, I actually prefer my whiskey at room temperature and straight.
And then there's that, and there's the Vanhattan that he spoke about. So,
They're a Vanhattan.
so you have 13-year-old Van Winkle Rye, you have some one of the Van Winkle Bourbons, 50-50, and then some Carpano Antica Family.
Yeah. Imagine making a cocktail out of Van Winkle whiskey, bourbon. Apparently it's a thing. Hey, that's the way he drinks it. Who are we to judge? But
I can't know if it's called a Vanhattan, who cares? It's
you do, in drinking these though, you do get a sense they are incredibly special. And they are meant to be drank, they are meant to be opened, they are meant to be enjoyed, they're meant to be, special occasions. Don't knock it over. There's a little bit left in the glass. There's a nervous fella behind us in the dark there, sweating. Don't drop any whiskey. Damn sleeves. But you do get a sense of serious kind of real importance and real sense of family and
there's something special about drinking
Yeah.
these, and I think that sums it up. It's something special. It's not every day you can open up a whiskey that's 23 years old and 23-year-old bourbon whiskey at that. You can get older Irish whiskies, but that's because we don't have the same barrel interaction. Do you know what I mean? Like
we don't have the same temperature. It's a different animal, really.
I mean, like 23 years in Kentucky must be mid-30s, early 40s in Ireland, surely, with interaction and stuff. So I think we've seen a 40-year-old Irish whiskey yet.
We have
Really?
the Middleton, very rare old Middleton distillery.
Yeah.
What do they call the release?
Silence.
Silent Distillery. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's. I think the first one was 40, and I think the second one is 42.
Yeah.
41, 42. I'm not entirely sure, because I think the price tag was 40,000 euros a bottle.
Yeah.
Something crazy. But
And even a Pappy in secondary market isn't 40,000 euros small. But even look at the colour, it's it's all barrel. It's all
And in Ireland, a lot of the difference here is this is virgin bourbon barrels.
Yeah.
Whereas virgin wild American oak. Whereas in Ireland, typically what we do is we take it in first fill or second fill. So we get a lot of our casks from the US, and it's typically all bourbon. And we fill it then with our spirit, which gets the influence, but it's certainly not the same thing. Plus, our mash bills are completely different.
Yeah, utterly different. But it's and something that just for anyone who doesn't wants to know it, with the bourbon barrels, the barrel for all the Pappies and all the Weathers, it's all the same. So it's all char 4, which is 55 seconds of char, so it's quite a deep char.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a little bit of information, really.
Yeah, well, look, it was great. I don't think we have too much more to kind of talk about. I think we've ticked all the boxes. We certainly ticked all the boxes in a form of drinking everything. As I said, it was my first time on camera, or first time ever drinking any of the Pappy stuff. It was an absolute pleasure to do it with yourself, Ian. And thank you to yourself. Thank you to the lads again. I know I've said this and I do repeat myself quite a lot, but thank you again to the lads at Paris Texas here. Do make sure you keep an eye out on the Facebook page for Paris Texas and the Whiskey Guild for an upcoming tasting. But for my first experience drinking Pappy Van Winkle whiskey and coming up to this, we've spoken about this for months doing this video.
I think it was November. You rang me first.
I did, yeah. I rang you back. That's 8 months ago to try and get this together because of the coronavirus pandemic and all that stuff. It's been near impossible, and the easing of restrictions have allowed us to do this. So, yeah. To summarize, outstanding whiskeys. Highly recommend if you do get the chance. Don't pay stupid money and open them. Share them with family, friends, special occasions.
Make some Vanhattans.
Try it, yeah. Do your thing. Actually, a Vanhattan. I should do a recipe for a Vanhattan, maybe down below in the description.
Yeah, it was 50-50 bourbon rye.
And there was vermouth in it, wasn't
it? And then Antica formula,
yeah. We'll leave that down below as well. Don't forget, I think I said this already, but I'm not sure because I forget everything that I say anyway. But like, subscribe, keep up to date, check all the social media links down below, and the Facebook group Whiskey and Whiskey as well, which will have all this. And hopefully we'll get to try more Buffalo Trace products coming up in the near future. Everything is here in Paris, Texas. So thank you again, Robert, for your hospitality. Whiskey bar manager of the world, sitting over there and quietly watching us drink his whiskey in his whiskey bar that we opened. So it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. It's been awesome. We'll talk to you again soon.
Right,
for the Whiskey Chaser, Sláinte.
Cheers.